Israel says it's going to carry out an attack on Iran now because of the Yemeni strike on the Ben Gurion Airport. So I mean, maybe we should talk about that. This is a huge incident. I'm sure you saw the footage of this missile that came down and
Yeah.
hit Ben Gurion. To me, I didn't even see any interceptors. It came down fast, big explosion. The U.S. has two THAAD systems in Israel. They have the Arrow 3 and David Sling, multiple layers of air defense, and a single ballistic missile from the Yemenis went through all of them.
Right.
How is
Yeah.
that possible?
Well, uh, yeah, well, it's certainly possible. I mean, that's even the best air defense system is not ironclad. There's nothing's 100%. Something occasionally missiles will get through, even when you have a very good air defense system. But it has to be worrying for the Israelis, because again, it wasn't part of some sort of large scale attack. One way that you overwhelm, well, one way to attack a territory that has strong air defense is to overwhelm that air defense system, right? Instead of sending one or two, you send 50 or 100, and maybe many of those are actually dummies. They may not even have warheads, but the air defense systems can't distinguish between real and real incoming missiles, those carrying the warheads and those that don't. So they're forced to fire at all of them, and then they basically empty their chambers, and many of the air defense, many of the missiles get through. But this was, to my knowledge, this was just one. And they had ample warning it was being fired from far away, but it got through, and it reveals a weakness. They have shot down a number of them, let's say, but if they can only get, let's say, 4 out of 5, and they're shooting them one at a time, what does that tell you? When they're going to be faced with more sophisticated missiles from Iran, and Iran will be able to launch a large scale attack that almost certainly would overwhelm their air defense system.
Right. I think this should be a huge wake up call to the United States and Israel. But of course, the response from Israel is immediately, we're going to hit back even harder, this terrorist attack. Of course, Israel has bombed the airport in Yemen, in Sana'a. They bombed the airport in Damascus. They bombed the airport in Beirut. So when it comes to bombing airports, Israel's still number one by far.
Yeah, but for them, it's always defense, right? Right.
Right. But, I mean, these THAAD interceptors, I believe there's only 7 in the world. Each system cost almost $2 billion. 2 of them are in Israel. It takes about 100 men to operate each. These are U.S. personnel that are operating each one of these systems. It takes 100 of them. I think this is just another glaring example of huge waste and just incompetence and inability to our military-industrial complex to step up to the plate and develop and engage in real modern warfare now. If the Houthis are able to get through our most expensive air defense systems with just a single ballistic missile, what is the point of this thing? It's a huge, expensive system. I think every interceptor of that system costs $12 million. So even if it was effective, it's clearly cannot be used in a real war of attrition. And even a short war, you have to fire a couple of these each time. They cost $12 million a pop. Iran sends over a couple hundred drones and missiles or ballistic missiles. You're out of ammunition, and then you can't build anymore. It takes way too long. You take out one of those batteries. There you goes, 15% of the total supply of THAADs.
Right. Yeah, no, and you can see it again in the fight between the Houthis and the U.S. Navy in the Red Sea. It's just, again, Yemen is the poorest country in the Arab world, one of the poorest countries in the world. And yet it is still fighting toe-to-toe with the U.S. Navy. And it's because the new technology has just completely leveled the playing field again. It's just, just looking at what the other day, again, the USS Truman, the aircraft carrier, had to take evasive action with the result that a $60 million F-18 was lost, went overboard. And it was just one incoming missile or drone. I'm not sure exactly what it was that they were trying to evade. But I'm sure, the cost of that was well below $1 million. The cost of this aircraft carrier is something like $11 million. Now, I think it would probably be a mistake to say that, okay, this one missile would sink the aircraft carrier. But it just gives you an idea of what we're dealing with. I mean, just these expenses, these systems are so expensive. And the initial price tag, but then also the maintenance costs are very, very high, and then the personnel costs, because there's so many people that are required to maintain them. Maybe in an initial exchange of fire, they're pretty effective. But that's what, as we can see from the not the Iran war, but the Ukraine war, that's not what modern warfare is all about. It's actually industrial warfare, and industrial warfare is about costs and reliability, and that's what we don't have. We have these fragile, over-engineered, very complex, very, very costly systems, again, that can be impressive on the first salvo, but then when you get into a war, a long grinding war, you just can't maintain them. You don't, they're too costly, and in the long run, costs really matter, to sustain a long-term effort. So yeah, no, it's again another example of what we've been talking about.
So does this prove that Israel is just completely vulnerable then, right? I mean, if the Houthis can get through with a single ballistic missile, I know they've shot down some in the past, but this is, unless Israel, is this possible that Israel maybe potentially allowed it to strike, and then that way they have a reason, an excuse to attack Iran?
Well, I don't think so. First of all, it's kind of a stretch, because the Houthis hit Ben Gurion Airport. They didn't actually hit a runway. My understanding is they hit a grove of trees, but outside it, but I guess close to some facilities. I think maybe 6, 7, 8 people were injured by this. But to say that this gives you an excuse to attack Iran, they'll seize on anything. I don't think they would risk actually a missile striking Ben Gurion Airport, because it really does harm them. That's the thing, is that this is their air link to the rest of the world. And if airlines actually are fearful that their aircraft could be hit, either in flight or on the ground, their flights will be canceled. And tourists who are thinking about booking a flight to Israel, some of them may go, but others are going to think twice about it now. And if there's another hit, so I think it would be, I can't say that's impossible. It may be, but that's a very risky calculation on their part, because they actually do suffer real damage to their reputation. I think it has to be a very worrying development for them. And now the Houthis have declared some sort of air blockade. In other words, they say that they are going to continue to strike Ben Gurion Airport.
Right. I was going to ask about that. So they're saying that they'll do this air blockade. Do you think it can be effective, just as they've been doing the Red Sea? They can actually stop air traffic?
Well, it could certainly put a major dent in it, which would be very significant, economically. Because again, maybe if only the occasional missile gets through, that's enough to really to frighten different airlines away, and tourists and other travelers. It could be, they don't have to make even direct hits, just like this. If every few weeks there's another strike like this that gets through and lands somewhere, in the Ben Gurion Airport area, I think that's probably enough to cause serious problems for the Israelis.
That's their only major international airport, right? Is Ben Gurion, or is there another one?
That's the only one I'm aware of. There may be another one, but that's the big one, And I think the great majority of air traffic goes through Ben Gurion.
Okay, so if they're successful in really tamping down air traffic in and out of Ben Gurion, can you explain to me the impact that's going to have? I mean, Israelis, will they start? They won't be able to leave so easily, right? I mean, people won't be able to come in, out. Right. It's going to.
Yeah, well, I think probably El Al, the Israeli national airline, will continue to fly. It may make it somewhat more difficult. It depends on how effective, how many missiles get through. Like if they're saying there's the occasional missile, okay, the airport will continue to function. But, maybe some airlines, I would expect some airlines would cancel. And just that fact is going to be hard.
I think now, some already have.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Yeah. That makes sense. That kind of reminds me, I think it was, I have two memories I just want to mention. First of all, I believe it was last year, or was it? It was 2 years. Okay, we actually went to Russia in October of 2023. So it was not long after October 7th in Israel. And I remember, we landed we fly into Russia via Istanbul. And we spent quite a few hours in the Istanbul airport. But I just remembered looking up at the different, flight information boards, and you saw all these cancellations, a lot of cancellations, and they were flights to Israel, and I think also to Jordan too. And because there was clearly this fear at that time. And so this is something that, airlines monitor very closely, and they don't want to run this risk. Yeah, you say that a couple of airlines have already canceled, and another strike could really cause a stampede. It is a very difficult, very precarious situation for the Israelis. And then the other, this is an old memory. I was 6 years old, and we were flying. My parents were taking me and my three sisters back to East Africa. And we flew actually we had a stop in Tel Aviv. And I just remember, I just have a very brief memory of just seeing military equipment and military jeeps, And then during our flight, we went over the Red Sea, but very carefully. We didn't cross over Egyptian or Saudi territory. We stayed right over the sea. And my mother explained to me that it was because of the fear of missiles, launched from those countries, because it was approximately 1968, I think, when we did that. So it was right after the 1967 war, and things were tense, and there was a concern about the safety of airlines at that time. I just wanted to mention that because it's something that I remembered when we're talking about this. Again, Israel is a small country and very vulnerable. It doesn't, again, Yemen, which is comparatively very, very weak, can still pose some kind of partial blockade by sea and air. And that gives you, again, I think, an idea of how vulnerable Israel is, and really how foolish it is for it to provoke a war with Iran, because Iran can do so much more damage. We've seen it already in those, True Promise operations. Especially the second one, where I remember the video footage of one after another, warhead coming down and unimpeded, striking pretty much at will. Quite a few of their missiles penetrated the defenses, and now they say, because of the data that they collected from those operations, again, that they have even more effective missiles.